Oh, welcome back to Candid Conversations. Assuming you've heard the previous ones. If not, go back and listen, and you'll be stuck in a feedback loop where you have to listen to the next one.
Welcome to our first visitors. Do you think we'll have any first visitors for episode 5?
Maybe. I mean, we currently have visitors of a frozen burrito sitting on top of the camera to keep things thawed. I mean, cool. So, I mean, that's maybe a visitor.
Yeah, friends and family, the usual, like the...
Oh, are you thinking like visitors to join the podcast or listeners to listen to a podcast?
Either watchers or listeners, but...
there's people who listen to it.
Frozen goods to cool down cameras also works.
Yes.
As visitors.
Visitors here.
We won't get much feedback from those frozen goods other than their...
What are you talking about? It is a feedback loop. The heat thaws it. It dissipates stuff. It's great. So, sorry. Speaking of feedback loops, weirdest transition in the world there. But
I bet you can figure it out.
I'm sure I could if I put more energy and effort into it. But I wanted to talk about I replaced a bunch of lights in my house the other day, right? Never really done that before, and so I was doing wiring and figuring it out. And first, thank goodness for both my dad that knows what he's doing, and then after he left for ChatGPT that helped me through things that I didn't understand how to do. But I was thinking about circuitry, right? So when you think about a circuit, circuits only power things when they're closed, right? You turn a light on, you're closing a circuit. Flip a switch, it connects it, and that's when the power flows through it. And the same thing is true with feedback loops, right? You can have a feedback loop, but unless it's closed, meaning the output of that feedback loop goes somewhere that then triggers the next stage of the feedback loop, right? Unless that happens, feedback loops lose power. We talked in the previous episode about how feedback loops need fuel to continue, right? And a lot of times it's that trigger of what's happening to close the loop that provides the needed fuel for the next step.
So your electrical example is if we had a bunch of light switches with no light bulbs inserted at the end of the circuit.
Like that would be a good example. But I think the point is regardless, if the circuit is left open, there's no power in it.
Yeah.
Right? And so a feedback loop, if it's left open, just doesn't have any power.
Yep.
Conversely, when a feedback loop is closed, when a circuit is closed, it can power all sorts of things. Things that can be transformational for what you do, who you are, how you live. I had a grandma that was really old. Before she passed away, I remember asking her what vivid memories she has. And one of her memories was the day her town got electricity. Right? But think about that. Imagine what, and she said one of the first things they did is they bought a communal laundry thing to run laundry there, a washer. Think of how much more efficient that is because it has power. Feedback loops, especially ones we want, the adaptive ones, the ones that we want to improve our organizations, they need power to be able to run. And in doing so, they run much more efficiently. They allow you to do a whole bunch of other things besides spending all day doing laundry, right? And, it's running itself to mesh the analogies between there. And so when we power our feedback loop, it works much better without us spending the time and energy into it. And the only way it can be powered is if it's closed.
It's completed.
So the ChatGPT summary of that is powered feedback loops are more powerful.
Powered feedback loops are by nature powered. Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's the difference between the manual labor and the having it be an automatic thing.
Yep.
So is the problem people aren't closing them? Are people starting them, or they're there? They're obviously there, but are people maybe starting them, initiating them, but they're not closing them?
Totally.
I think so. Yeah,
we get exactly what happens.
Yeah.
So why are they not closing them? Is that where the effort takes place, or is that where just the know-how, the understanding of feedback loops? Hopefully this is insightful enough that I'm actually not finishing this loop. I'm not closing this loop up.
Yeah, I think my guess is there's probably all kinds of variables, reasons why people don't do it. But I would say a very common one is think of the employee that comes in and has a basic skill set, but then runs out of the next step of I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. So if you're on the feedback side, you're getting responses, again, always back to customer service examples or customer experience. And we get all that feedback, but we don't know how to read graphs and charts. And we're just okay, cool, we got some info. What do I do with that now? I think that often is the case of like, hey, I'm really good at this front end of the feedback loop. I've never had any experience, and that makes sense. That's, I think, a finer skill set as well.
Yep. So, and I guess to answer your question, Mark, feedback loops don't break in one place, right? They break in multiple places. And you really are kind of running a gauntlet to get through to find the right spot to be able to actually close the loop. You could same way in a circuit, right? You could have a circuit break at the light switch. It could be broken at the light. It could be broken somewhere just in the middle of my wall where I have wiring there, right, that has gone wrong. If you think of that feedback loop of the asking, collecting, analyzing, implementing, and notifying, it can break at the asking. Rarely does, but could. People just may not ask, right? People spend tons of time and energy and effort asking.
I think they think it is very breakable at the asking stage, so they want the perfect question.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. That is a great point, right? Sometimes people spend all of their energy before they can even get stuff out there because they're so worried about asking the perfect thing. So it can break there.
Yeah, no, analysis process, right? I think a lot of people struggle with that in everything.
Yep.
In any feedback loop.
And then the second part is it could break at the collecting. It might be just too hard to get all of that feedback back, especially if you're doing it manually. Put up a whole bunch of paper surveys out, like just, I've got other stuff to do. This normally isn't my main job, whatever it is. Right?
It's the reason why Mark does the spreadsheets. We're like, yeah, no.
No, I don't want to do that. Exactly.
Well,
that's hard.
One day my developer will help me build the spreadsheet into an actual app. That'll be even better.
It will be. It'll be great. Yeah. So it can break at the collecting. It can break at the analyzing, which is interesting because you have these. Well, I want to say there's three spots for that analysis paralysis: the over-analysis of what I should ask, the over-analysis of actually analyzing the data I'm getting back, and then you can overanalyze other steps later. And so it can break at that point where I'm analyzing stuff where I just don't have the time or energy. Maybe I spent so much time or energy distributing a survey, so to speak, right? Get it out there, I get them all collected, and now I've just got this giant pile of stuff on a desk. And maybe the intern finally gets through it all, but by that point, we've moved on. We're working on other projects, other things. I don't ever go back and look at the spreadsheet that's been produced. And so it breaks down there, and our circuit, our loop, breaks there because I don't analyze it. Then say I do analyze it. Right? Cool. Done all those things. Now the hardest part is making a change, because that's
and
the real
a change
work.
is a decision, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the real work, and that's often where people struggle the most. Is they've spent all of this time, energy, and effort gathering feedback, right? And again, we're thinking in a client feedback, employee feedback, whatever type of context that way. You're gathering these pieces of feedback, and you don't have any energy remaining to implement the changes that the feedback directs, right? Because oftentimes it's not easy. It's not, that analyzing it may not be very clear exactly what to do. It may take some iterative approaches to things. And so it can break there where I'm not actually doing something. And then lastly, the last thing to do is notifying, is where we tell people or we inform the system what has changed based off of the feedback we got. So then it can provide the needed fuel to restart that feedback loop.
Round.
So it could break at that point. And that's actually where I think a lot of analysis paralysis falls into. People say, well, how do I let people know what's changing? Like, what if they don't have context? What if they don't understand? What if they take this the wrong way? Well, it's like, okay, you're just going to break your feedback loop by not doing it, right? You're no longer providing fuel. No one, again, in the context of gathering surveys or things like that, no one's going to want to submit another survey if they don't feel like you did anything with the one in the past.
Yep.
And so each step of the process has a place for that circuit to break. And if you want it to have power, it needs to have all of those things running.
So when we're doing survey consults and things like that, we'll often tell people, hey, the front end of this is super important. Pulse automates a lot of that. But the thing that we're talking about today is closing the feedback loop, which is notifying. And we'll tell people, if you aren't prepared to do that, then probably don't do this at all. So why does that matter so much? So let's focus in on that part of the circuit.
Yeah. So why notifying matters so much is because it provides the needed input back into the system for it to be adapted and changed, right? So that's just in general when we talk about a feedback loop. When you think about a feedback loop with like your clients, right? So say Rem gives me an answer on a survey saying, hey, I really just like the hours that you currently are open. I collect that, I analyze it, say, cool, hours. All right. I then implement a change. I change the hours. If I never then go back to REM and say, hey, our hours have changed, nothing actually improves. And I don't know if the new hours actually are helping the situation or hurting the situation. If REM complains about hours and I was open from 9 to 5 and I say, cool, I'm now open from 7 to 3, all right, I might have made it way better for him. I made it way worse for him.
Doesn't matter.
But there's no way for me to know unless he then has a way of triggering that feedback loop again. Conversely, if I go back to him and say, hey, yeah, we changed our hours from 7 to 3. Thank you for the feedback. The first thing he's going to say, if it's not the right thing, is, oh, that actually doesn't work for me. No, like not how I wanted. And you can then use that feedback to do that whole structure all over again and go from there.
Yep.
Now, there's a bigger thing, though, at play here than just feedback. Feedback's important. Don't get me wrong. But feedback is a means to an end, not an end in itself. One of the important ends that organizations struggle with, that where feedback helps immensely, is trust.
Yeah.
Trust.
Kind of one of the why it matters, right?
Yes. And trust is really the currency of change. If you want to change something in an organization, in a society, in a community, or a person, you better have trust. There's no way I could go to Mark and say, hey, I'm thinking you should really change X, Y, or Z unless you were to really trust me on that thing, right? If you really trusted me, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I might be willing to make that change, right? And the way that we tend to develop trust is by showing a provable, repeatable pattern through our life. So we've known each other a long time. One of the benefits of that is we have this provable, repeatable patterns that we can see over and over again that have happened through our lives. So we know we can trust each other because of that. But trust goes beyond that. In fact, we were in a meeting just the other day where somebody explained trust as a few different steps, but one of them is repeatable transactional outcomes, right? That's not trust, but that's a step towards it. When I know that when me and you are interacting in a certain way, I can expect a certain outcome. Trust steps beyond that, but it's really built off of those. And so the feedback loop provides a place for you to have those repeatable transactional outcomes where people start seeing, oh, I say something, you listen, you make something better, and you let me know, and this happens over and over again. I trust you more. Every time that happens, I trust you a little bit more than I did before.
Real world example of that silly thing, and maybe a potential future sponsor of the Candid Conversations, Maverick gas stations. We love you. No, that's my trust. It's their system and processes. I will drive. Like, I don't look for any other gas stations. If I'm in Utah on I-15, I just search the next Maverick. Why? Because their bathrooms are always in the same place. They're always in pretty good condition. It's just a repeatable thing that I trust now. Yeah. And they've built that. And that feedback aside, like how they got there and arrived at that, I'm sure they did their own internal thing, but they did something that works to build a level of trust in me.
Totally. Right. Yeah. So the interesting thing is, at least for the people that we work with, most of those people are attempting some sort of change, right? It's that organizational change. It is that larger change of a society or a community. And almost always the people we're working with are doing probably the hardest of all, but is an interpersonal change, is a change within someone, right? Or someone's situation. And when you're doing that, oftentimes you start at a trust deficit. Why would I trust you? And so one of the most powerful tools you can use is closing that feedback loop, because then it is powered and they see that and they are continually going through this positive loop where, hey, I do this thing and it tells me I should do more of it. I trusted you. I get this outcome. Even if that trust is this minuscule trust that you're not going to take this feedback wrong, right? I trusted you. I now get a positive outcome, which says I should trust you more. And the more of those you can chain together, the more likely they're willing to listen to you for the things that really matter.
I think, go ahead, Mark.
Well, we talk in analogies a lot and in personal examples a lot, but what we're really referring to, and hopefully a lot of our audience, is dealing with people, dealing with humans, right? And we ought to be maybe more sensitive to that sometimes, but
totally.
How important is that, and hopefully that why is enough to actually trust this process, trust the feedback loop. Let's get this powered so that people can get out of that deficit and can get to a level where we can actually communicate,
You-
we can actually talk. And this vulnerability level that a lot of these people are at can grow and can improve and can build, and all of a sudden we're changing
Get
people's
better.
lives.
Yeah. Interesting thing that I think I've noticed over the 10 years of doing this is I think, to your point, Mark, of dealing with individuals and people, I think there's a lot of patience there with building trust for the most part. We'll iterate and notice something about someone and change, and that feedback loop's happening all the time. But I think organizationally, lots of times I don't think there's. Do you think it's a problem? I guess is what I'm asking. Of organizations wanting a silver bullet and not having the patience with those little microtransactions of trust with building their feedback loops and being intentful about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's just an organizational problem. I think that's a me problem, right? Like, it is incredibly hard to continually be putting into the bank small transactions when you want a big sum at the end. But the truth of the matter is those small transactions are the only way you really get to the big sum, unless you have some miraculous thing that happens, right? But the most proven way to get big gains, whether that is financial, whether that is personal, whether that is physical, is those small, meaningful interactions over time. It's going to the gym every day, even though I don't see the growth immediately type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody wants to. And I think the reason they want to is because they're dealing with incredibly hard problems, and they would love for people to be out of these situations as quickly as possible. And that gets frustrating when it takes longer, right? So I mean, I don't blame them at all. I think we all fall into that same boat, And sorry.
No, keep going. I'll follow up.
What I was going to point out is a lot of times in these situations, it is easy to blame the person receiving services. For instance, and it's easy for those receiving services to then turn around and place blame on the organizations. Mm-hmm. So there's two terms that pop up often, right? One is service resistant, of saying, oh, that person is just resistant to the services that we're offering. They don't want to be housed. They don't want to be fed. They don't want to visit a case manager. They don't want help.
They don't want to fit into our system.
They don't want to sit into our system. When really, I don't know anyone that doesn't want to be housed, fed, get the help that they need. What often is they're really saying, I don't trust the way in which you're trying to make me do this.
Yeah.
Right. And I might point out the way they're trying to make me do this may be the right way. It's just they lack the trust. And so to me, anytime I hear of service resistant, I think trust lacking.
Yeah. Low trust.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's a low trust population.
Yeah. In the homeless services arena, it's you hear the low barrier, high barrier. Sometimes maybe it just needs to be low trust, high trust, right? Sure. Like which service do you need?
Yep. And where do we need to start and build you from, right? And in a lot of these cases, they have good reasons to distrust things. The system has broken for them in ways that they may not fully understand or comprehend or whatever, but they've been let down by organizations, and they're going to group organizations all together. And so it makes sense that they lack trust. And I think we experienced that ourselves. Mark, I was just thinking about your experience with Penny. Do you think you trust doctors more or less after your experience with Penn?
Well, maybe it's a doctors and insurance groups.
That is a big question. I definitely have a lot less trust.
Sure.
And it's not that I'm critical towards them. Like, I understand they're doing their job, but we went to 10 different professionals, I'll say, 100%. And 9 of them didn't know what it was, said it was something that it wasn't.
Yep.
Before we finally found an answer. So.
Yeah.
And so I think about that, right? Like that's.
And it's not that they weren't trying to help.
No.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think some of them are just kind of checking a box.
Certainly.
For sure, but I do think that they did have good intentions, but it was also a difficult situation, but definitely less trust.
I think this is, and I apologize for using you guys as the example. I think it's a great example of it, right? Imagine now the situation's flipped a little bit and someone is homeless and you've been let down by the people that are trying to help you, right? You have less trust in the people trying to help you. Does it mean the people were trying to help you? Does it mean the doctors were doing anything malicious or were wrong? No, like they were wrong. Being human means you're wrong, right? But it also is the same way of, being human also means you lose trust when you see people fail at that transactional relationship, right? And so it is completely natural that you would lose trust in the doctors that missed out on this large thing. In the same way, it's completely natural somebody that's struggling with a homeless service group feels like we failed along the path, and now they've lost trust, right? And so it completely makes sense. And instead of blaming groups for it, right, I think the important thing is to start to say, okay, if we know this is going to happen, we know we're human. How do we then build things in place to help us regain that trust and protect against it? And I really think that's where feedback comes in.
Yeah.
Right? A good, well-running feedback loop will help rebuild the trust even when mistakes are made.
Yeah.
And maybe especially when mistakes are made.
Yeah, and that transitioned nicely into maybe with this and closing the feedback loop, what are the common mistakes that we see with closing the feedback loop? I think the first one that comes to mind, I don't have a name or a tagline for it, but I think it's to the point that you were talking about, all these complex systems and the trust levels, whether it's there or not. I think it's people assume that you have to have a fix when really closing the feedback loop can say, we heard you.
I don't know if any of our wives are going to listen to this. If so, I might get in trouble as I get here. But did either of you guys have this experience where at some point early in my marriage, my wife came to me with a problem and gave me, the whole story. And I remember being like, okay, cool, I'll fix it. Here you go. And she's like, no, I didn't want you to fix it. I just wanted you to listen to me. And I was so baffled by that. But then I realized I think that is part of the thing. Sometimes people don't want it fixed. They just want to be listened to.
Sometimes it's stupid.
Yes is the answer there. But I realize I do the same
100%,
thing all the time, right? Like, I'm doing the exact same thing, all the time with that, and it's knowing when to fix versus when to, I wrap the cord around my thing.
Yeah, even like I remember back a while ago with like even some political conversations that I've gotten into. Sometimes I'm floating out an idea of like, what do you guys think about that? But then it gets into, well, that idea is right or wrong. And it's like, no, I didn't want to get to the right or wrong. I wanted to get, what do you think about this idea? Let's just talk about it.
Yep.
Right. And maybe that's how I need to look at it. If Tracy's coming to me with, I want you to listen to me.
I still fail at that often of the oh, is this one I'm supposed to solve now?
Yep.
Or is this a different type of thing?
Yeah, maybe that's something that organizations can take and say, you're going to have people that are inherently fixers, and they're probably better positioned to be looking at that data and in between the analyzing and the implementing phase, but they're not the notifiers, or they're not the askers. They're not good at just listening. They need to solve a problem, where there's people that are just better at sitting back, listening it in, taking it in, right?
True.
And so inside of an organization, maybe you need to strategically think about that, of what people you have in place and what their skill sets are with this feedback loop.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So other common pitfalls of or where the notify circuit gets broken.
Yeah, so I think one of the most common, and we touched on a little bit, is running out of energy or resources before you even get there, right? You used all your energy asking and collecting. You used all your time doing whatever. That's a very common one and a very fixable one at this point, right? Like, there are systems and processes in place to do this. We don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. You don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. There's plenty of groups out there that run very high quality tooling to be able to do this type of thing. So you then have the energy to do the stuff only you can do. No group can come in and implement changes in your organization and notify it and have it actually work out, right? That's just not, that's literally replacing you. Like having someone else come in and conduct a survey, do interviews, run an online platform, whatever it's going to be, those things are solved problems. So not using that and expending your energy there, I think is one of the more common ones that we see.
Absolutely. What about, it probably falls into the analysis paralysis category. We talked about that a little bit, but I think sometimes I'm guilty of this personally with interpersonal relationships, but I'd call it just the ego-driven situation where the data is not what you expected, or maybe all the data comes back and it's everyone's just saying, I want fountain drinks in the lobby. And you're like, what do I do with that? I'm not going to promise, I'm not going to go back and notify them, congratulations, we now have fountain drinks in the lobby. So I think in my head, I look at that, or I don't have enough positive feedback that I got that I want to share. I was looking at this as an ego play. And so maybe we should coin a term for that. I don't know what it is.
So I think this is going to sound like marriage advice, and I suppose it could be good marriage advice. But
we just turned into a counseling/therapy podcast.
Is the understanding?
Hey, we have so many listeners on this podcast. Maybe we should pivot.
I can get that many on there. So, lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
It was important. No, you're good. The important thing to understand is that all feedback is valid, but it's not all correct.
Right.
A lot of times we misinterpret those two things, right? Feedback being valid means someone actually feels that way. And sometimes we attack that and we say, no, that's not correct, so therefore it is invalid. You can't have felt that way. Well, truth doesn't actually have really any impact on how I feel about a situation. And in fact, sometimes when faced with truth directly, I will still yell at it and say, no, that can't be true because I feel like it cannot be that way. That's a very human thing, right? And when collecting feedback, that often happens. We look at this feedback.
Or to be embarrassed, right? Or whatever emotion kicks up because of that.
And so what we try to do is we try to invalidate the feedback by invalidating the people.
Yeah. How many times have we heard, oh, that's just Don. He's always putting in crazy feedback.
100%, right? Or, oh, kids are filling those things out. Or that person just has a bone to pick with us. Or they're not smart. Or they don't know the situation or whatever, right? We attack the person because if we can make the person not of worth, the feedback's not valid and we have to care about it. Now, when we conversely compare that with the idea of saying feedback is not correct, but still valid, we no longer have to attack the person. We can just say, that's wrong. There's, and so you can say, hey, soda machine, great, valid feedback, not the right idea for our organization. And you can go back to people and say, hey, we appreciate your feedback. We appreciate the soda. Here's why that is not right for our organization.
Yeah.
We don't have the budget. We don't have the funding. We don't have the water to go into the wall to be able to put a soda machine in. We don't have whatever, X, Y, or Z, right? When we approach things that way, it builds trust. When we approach it the other way, even if we don't go back to them and say, hey, you're worthless, just the pure thought of thinking it is conveyed in our interactions with them. Yeah. We think less of them. Yeah. And so
and by not closing the feedback loop, it tells them that wasn't really that important. Those suggestion boxes that people put physical paper in probably actually get a fair amount of responses. It's just that's usually a place where feedback goes to die.
And it goes beyond that. It doesn't say that feedback wasn't important. It says you're not important.
Yeah.
Like, think about that in that context. If that's what we're communicating when we don't close those loops, which is why sometimes it's bad to have. What's that?
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Almost, right?
Yep. And that's why sometimes it's almost bad to have a feedback loop running when you're not ready to actually close it. You're not ready to do anything. We'll talk to groups all the time about that, of saying, hey, great, it's awesome you're exploring doing this, but if you're not ready for this, don't make the investment in this yet.
It's the same as a company starting a project and not assigning a project owner and no deadline. Yep. It's just, let's go do this thing and let's build this new product and no one's running it. So
100%. All right.
Any other common failures? Yeah, I think we're close to probably 3 or 4 minutes and you wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any others that you guys have noticed that places where feedback loops fail that you've noticed.
Probably, and it's by way of, I'll just say the scenario is when we're reaching out and prospecting to cities, we get a lot of traction with city council members, and a big thing that comes up is, I think they're hiding the data. And usually that's, that typically almost kicks up a conspiracy theory of, hey, these service providers or this program is hoarding all this, taking all this funding and not doing anything with it, or things are really, really bad. When in every scenario that we've run into, both have some validity, but usually that service provider is doing awesome, doing great. They just don't have time, and they actually don't realize that that data is getting siloed. And so oversharing, over-transparency, again, going to every extent possible to close the feedback loop with every stakeholder involved is vital. It's hard. It's the energy, right? And sometimes maybe you need to assign someone to be, hey, you're our notifying person. You're our feedback closer. How do you do this?
There's actually a really good example of where groups break down as well is this thought that my notification has to be a one-by-one type of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, well, how am I going to respond to Blake if he didn't put his name in attached to the survey response?
Sure.
And people think it needs to be one-for-one responses.
Yes, or how do I respond to 12,000 people that fill out a survey?
Yeah.
Right. The truth is, you don't have to respond to everybody. You just need to respond in a public way so people can then see it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. You can do this by like putting posters in your organization. You can do it with a newsletter. You can do it through
social media posts.
Social media. Do it.
A town hall.
Do a town hall. Yeah. If you're a politician that was doing this, do a speech.
Hold a rally.
Right? Like you don't have to address the feedback one-on-one for the feedback to be addressed and have people feel like they've been heard. Right? It's the magic of feedback that it actually scales and that you're able to address multiple people's feedback with the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny in sales presentations when we talk about polls, we say, hey, there's three things, three pretty consistent things that we see in feedback in certain verticals. And I can see people kind of get on the edge of their seat and like, oh, I want to hear about this because they're interested in, I want some of this feedback.
Yep.
It's the same thing. I think their guests, clients, patients, whatever it is, want that same thing of, hey, of all the feedback we've gotten, here's the top three things. That probably swallows up 1,000 people, depending on how much volume they're working with. And so you can generalize the closing the feedback loop, the notification, and so it encompasses as many. And that's perfectly logical to say, hey, let's just address the top three from a volume perspective, and that's the best way that we can get almost one-to-one.
Yep. And I think it's important to know, as we were talking about the correct versus valid, right? When we try to invalidate somebody, we say they're dumb, they're stupid, they don't know what they're talking about, they're ill-informed, they're whatever, right? And we assume the worst of them to invalidate their feedback. When we're closing a feedback system, we can actually assume the opposite, that people are intelligent, that they're well-read, that they're well-versed, and that they'll understand that you can't actually respond to everybody. But by you responding to some, you're actually reading and responding. And so because of that helps build their trust, even if you're not responding to their feedback.
Yeah. And at a minimum, it tells their logic. There is a system and a process in place for this, and I matter.
Yes.
I am a part of that process and system.
That is the most important part, right? Is if I express that people that gave feedback matter, even if your feedback's not the thing that was directly addressed in a notifying, I'm part of that group that matters, right? Because I gave feedback. Like that is, you can convey that over and over and over again to people by closing the feedback loop, by doing simple things of saying, hey, we're changing our hours based off this feedback. Or, hey, we can't install soda machines. Thank you for the feedback. Here's why we can't do it. Please give us more feedback, right? Notifying people doesn't have to be hard, right? It doesn't have to be complex. It just has to be something someone can see, someone can read, somebody can understand, and that people can share. And it'll do its work to propagate outward. And really what you're telling people is they matter. And every person that gave feedback matters.
Yep. I think that's a great place to wrap this up and really just close if we can distill it down into one thing. If you're starting this process of getting serious about feedback, it's funny, with the feedback loop, our recommendation is to start at the end. See if you're willing to close the feedback loop and notify people, and then reverse engineer it. Work backwards from there.
That's a good point. I guess the only other thing I'll throw out there is don't be afraid to spend money here so you can utilize your energy for improvement. Lots of groups think they're saving a lot of money by doing their own stuff, and they never get to the actual implementing stage, right?
Yeah.
They're going to spend hours creating surveys. They're going to implement some complex technological process, which technology can be awesome in this. But don't be afraid to spend money early in the process because the dividends are at the end.
Yeah.
If you spend your time early, you often never get to the dividends.
Yeah, the systems and the processes on that front end have been made and created and are efficient. What any service can't do for you is decide what changes, what you're going to implement, and to notify your clients. They can't do that for you.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
All right.
Okay,
See us
Join us.
next
See you
next
later.
time.
See you next time.